Okay, hey, welcome back to Soul Invictus. We're going to go over the oaths today. As far as what this series is about, uh, this is my study guide to help understand where Jesus was coming from, what he was trying to say, and we're going to put it together in a very logical way to get the most out of it. And we're going to combine different elements of the Gospels, or the different Gospels together that have the same key subject, and we're going to bind them together so we can put it all together and get the best meaning out of this. So today I'm going to go over the oaths. The oath parts in the Bible, there's not too many. The ones that make sense as far as the understanding of the oath overall, there's two sections in Mathew that I'm going to go over. The first one that I'm going to go over is Mathew 5:33. And so I've got this Bible study tool here, so you can check it out too. So you can check the link below if you want to find this. But Bible study tools is available. It's for free. You can go and check this out and see for yourself. So we'll start on 33 here. We'll do this. And the next one is going to be Matthew 23:16, which I will get to right after this. Let's see, I'm on Matthew 5. Okay, good. All right, let's do this. So, the teaching of the oaths. Again, you have heard that it was said to your ancestors, "Do not take a false oath, but make good to the Lord all that you vow." But I say to you, do not swear at all, nor by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Do not swear by your head, for you cannot make a single hair white or black. Let your yes mean yes, and your no mean no. Anything more is from the evil one. So according to this, you cannot take a false oath. So it's basically saying do not lie. You know, if somebody asks you something, and then you make a very elaborate way of describing how you're going to be faithful or true to something that they're asking you to do. Jesus is saying, don't even do that. Just say yes or no. You don't need to overly describe what you're going to do as far as promising somebody something. Whether you do it or you don't, whether you're for it or you're not. Just say yes and no. If you try to elaborate something, that is from the evil one. So that is from the devil, or that is from Satan. It's not right to do. It's not something that's even necessarily needed. So it's just saying, just be truthful. You can just say yes or no. There's not much more to it. You don't need to use adjectives and adverbs to describe something. The only time that would possibly be the case is if you're making a poem of some kind. Whether you're making a poem, which is usually just describing a feeling, that's a totally different thing. Other than that, just speak the truth. And if you do that, you are on the side of God. So let's move to, let's see here. All right, we're going to move to Matthew 23. And I'm going to go over a little bit more here, because I feel like a little bit more is important to talk about. So it's Matthew 23:16. I've got it right here. Let me get you caught up here on this side if you want to follow along here. Okay. I'm going to have to scroll down a bit more in a second here, but let's start this up. So, Matthew 23:16. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, if one swears by the temple, it means nothing. But if one swears by the gold of the temple, one is obligated. Blind fools, which is greater, the gold or the temple that made the gold sacred? And you say, if one swears by the altar, it means nothing. But if one swears by the gift on the altar, one is obligated. You blind ones, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? One who swears by the altar swears by it, and that is upon it. One who swears by the temple swears by it and by him who dwells in it. One who swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by him who is seated on it. So before I continue a little more further in here, I'm going to just basically say, oh, sorry, I think I was up a little high, but here's the part right here on the top here if you want to read this. I apologize, but I will move on ahead in a second. I just wanted to say here that what Jesus is trying to say is that what these blind fool guides, these Pharisees, are basically saying to him is that they're swearing upon the object, the objections of what is given to the temple. Jesus is saying that they're blind because they should be swearing by the subject. So that in a sentence, there's the subject, the verb, and the object. Then there's adjectives and adverbs in there, but this is how we do things. Everybody knows this. But what Jesus is saying is what's important is the first thing that comes first. And they're putting all the value of what they do into what the object is. They're not starting with the most important value, which is the subject, which is the beginning, the source, what's inside. The gifts come afterwards, but what's inside is the most important part. So then he goes on and he says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You pay tithes of mint, dill, and cumin, and have neglected the weightier. You have neglected the weightier things of the law, judgment and mercy and fidelity." So these are the weightier things of the law, the important things: judgment, mercy, fidelity. Those three things. But these you should have done, without neglecting the others. Blind guides who strain out the gnat and swallow the camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You cleanse the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside they are full of plunder and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisees, cleanse first the inside of the cup, so that the outside may be also clean. So if we stop here and we talk about this for a second, cleansing the inside of the cup, cleansing what's within. Jesus is talking up here earlier about the subject, the important part of God. And that's what's the most important thing. They're focused on how much is given to him, but they're not focused on him himself. And then he goes on later and he's describing what's within the cup, not the outside of the cup. So, I just dropped some water on there. Hold on, I have to take a drink. I'm sorry. So, he's talking about up here, right at the top, the subject part, the God part. That's the important part. Then the next one he's talking about the judgment, mercy, and fidelity. They're worried about the cumin, the dill, and that. They're worried about the exterior. They're worried about the gold, the exterior, what's on the outside, how it looks, when they should be worried about what's on the inside. And so we go on. It says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which appear beautiful on the outside, but inside are full of dead men's bones and every kind of filth. Even so, on the outside you appear righteous, but inside you are filled with hypocrisy and evil doing. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You build the tombs of the prophets and adorn the memorials of the righteous, and you say, if we had lived in the days of the ancestors, we would not have joined them in shedding the prophets' blood. Thus you bear witness against yourselves that you are the children of those who murdered the prophets. Now fill up what your ancestors measured out. You serpents, you brood of vipers, how can you flee from the judgment of Gehenna? Therefore, behold, I send to you the prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them you will kill and crucify, some of them you will scourge." in your synagogues, and pursue from town to town, so that there may come upon you all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the righteous blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, the son of Barachiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Amen, I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. The lament over Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you. How many times I yearned to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her young under her wings. But you were unwilling. Behold, your house will be abandoned, desolate. I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So basically, right at the end there, Jesus is saying, until you recognize the one that's coming in the name of the Lord, the house of Jerusalem is abandoned. That's what he's saying right at the end there. Totally abandoned until they recognize that. So, if we're going to talk a little bit more about it, which I think is kind of important, and I think you may have I think you may be getting this by now, but as far as what's being described and what's being talked about here is that they had a lot of hypocrisy within themselves. They wanted to teach and preach about what was right, what's on the outside, what you're doing with gold and gifts and tithes to the temples and stuff, but inside they're not doing the things that are important. Excuse me. So what they're trying to do and what they think is important is the gold, the gifts to the temple. That's what they believe is important. But Jesus is saying mercy, fidelity, and judgment. Basically taking real issues that people are having and working with that, helping somebody get the mercy that they need, helping people get the justice that they deserve, helping people get the fidelity, working on fidelity, helping people know, like what I said earlier with the whole divorcing thing, for them to want to help them understand that being faithful is a very, very important thing for their soul. Not just their life, but their soul. And I could read earlier about parts where if you did all the things that God would want you to do, you'd get all these other things that you needed as well. You don't have to toil so hard for all this stuff. God wants to give these things to you. So what they wanted to do with their oaths is just give to the temple. Focus on the temple. Focus on the building. Focus on thinking that by giving to the building that God's going to praise them and, take them up there, and that'll be great. But they're basically, what Jesus is saying, you're straining the gnat and then you're eating the camel. So that sounds a little confusing, but that kind of sort of means that they're trying to get out the gnat, because they're looking for the tiniest little thing to get rid of it because they don't want it. But in the end, they're eating a camel, so they're eating something because that they don't want to eat, but they got rid of something that they also didn't want to eat. That's even smaller and more insignificant. So what they're trying to do is focus on the things that are insignificant in comparison to something, that is more insignificant, or that is more significant. So they're avoiding the things that they need to do with the mercy, fidelity, and judgment. These are in the important things. This is the reason why this is in the sentence. I'm trying to explain this, but this is in a few different tiers of how it is written, and Jesus is trying to describe this in a few different tiers to combine it all together to make it easier for them to kind of grasp. But even still, it's a little tough to put it all together in a to say it perfectly. So I'm doing the best I can here to help you out. But when it gets to this point, he's saying that they were focused on the object of the gold, not with the God that's within, not the Heavenly Father. They're focused on the gold, what they give to the temple, not with the Father that they need to focus on. They're focused on the cumin, the mint, the dill, the foods, all the spices, all these little things. They're not focused on the mercy, the fidelity, things that they could do for other people, that they should be doing for other people. They're not focused on that. They're focused on all the things that make it look nice, the temple look nice, it smell nice, the nice foods, the procurements, the way it looks, all exterior. And he gets to this part, he's the cup and a dish. They want the outside to be beautiful, so exterior things, exterior beauties that they think they're giving to God. And when Jesus talked about the gnat, it's like Jesus saying, that's the really, really tiny little detail, that's not so important there. And then they get to the cup and, they're not worried about what's within. What's within is full of plunder and self-indulgence. So he's saying that because they want all these things, this is all for their plunder and self-indulgence. This gold, the food, all this stuff is just for them. And they feel like that's glorifying God. And then it gets to this part, at the end there, you're like whitewashed tombs, appear beautiful on the outside, but inside are full of dead men's bones. So you've made yourself look like this giant monument to what they believed was, something like a monument to themselves. Because a tomb is basically a monument to yourself, as that you have lived. And usually the bigger your tomb is, the more powerful you were in life. The more money you had to be able to do that. I can't be wrong in saying that, because that's pretty much the truth of it. If somebody gets a giant tomb, other people thought that person was really powerful or very significant, or that you thought you were very powerful and very significant, and therefore had the money to procure such a large tomb. It's very, it's about themselves, not about God. So Jesus is talking about this here. And so it's filled with the filth and death. There's nothing inside these people that he's describing here. They're filled with death. It looks good on the outside. They look nice, but inside they're full of death. Then he's saying that these people said that they wouldn't have been doing this to the prophets of the past, but Jesus is saying these are the very same people that would be doing it to the prophets and will be doing it to the prophets. The people that adorn themselves think that they're filled with God, and they adorn themselves with riches and all these kinds of things, but yet they don't do anything for anybody else. They take all this for themselves. They don't use it to find a way to help other people. What they could be doing, they're not doing. And so Jesus is saying that these very people are the ones that would persecute the real prophets of old, the real people that are trying to help others. And they're not going to make it. They're serpents. A lot of people describe serpents or reptilian races or things like that. Now, I'm not so certain I understand if the whole alien thing is a true thing or real. I don't really stand on that boat. As far as this goes, creating oaths, making oaths, this comes from that. And so this also comes from the part where the Pharisees were making heavy burdens for the people. If you read earlier in chapter 23, you read up, you'll see it. They're making a lot of heavy burdens to the people, telling them what they should do, what they shouldn't do, and making up all this stuff. And they didn't do any of that themselves. They just decided to stay in a little holy place, gather gold for themselves, and sort of hide. And they love places of honor, seats of honor, synagogues, marketplaces. They love to be saluted, or with the salutation of rabbi. As for you, do not be called rabbi, but you have but one teacher, and you are all brothers. Call no one on earth your father. You have but one Father in heaven. Do not be called master. You have but one master. So then he goes on to talk about the scribes and Pharisees, and he's telling the scribes and Pharisees, you lock the kingdom of heaven before human beings. You do not enter yourselves, nor do you allow entrance to those trying to enter. trying to enter. What do you for hypocrites? You traverse the sea and land, and make one convert, and when that happens, you make him a child of Gehenna, twice as much as yourselves. So they go around trying to convert people, and basically they send them to hell because of their lifestyle and how they live. So as far as oaths and stuff, this connects to the oaths of do not make elaborate gestures to say this and say that. It's also saying to these people, do not dress and act like these people, to make elaborate gestures and whatever to showcase yourself, because on the inside you might be dead. So according to this, it just comes down to the fact that when these people decided to do, because these people were the ones making a lot of oaths, oh, I promise this, I swear on heaven, I swear on earth, I swear on blah blah blah, and you can see how they were living their life, which according to their own oaths of judgment, mercy, and fidelity, they never really truly procured that. It was all about how much gold that they could get for their temple, how many nice things that they could have for themselves. And because they had these things for themselves, they would, act like they were doing what was right. They would boast themselves as if they were attuned to God because they had these things, and they weren't giving them away. So, yeah, I don't know how else to go through this. It really just basically ends up being what promise you make to other people, you should also have that type of promise within you. And it shouldn't be elaborate. It shouldn't be just what other people see, but it's not what you have inside of you. It's all about what you can do for others and not to make a big fake gesture. It's basically, most of this is about, don't be fake. Don't make up fake, ridiculous statements. Don't portray yourself as some fake, ridiculous person to advocate that you are, a part of God, when that's obviously not even the case. Jesus sat with sinners. He sat with tax collectors. He did people that thought themselves righteous. He says he wasn't there for the righteous. He was there for the sinners. It was there for people that really wanted to find the Father in heaven. He wasn't for these self-righteous people that thought that they were above everybody, because they were just hypocrites. So I wish I could talk more about this. It's kind of a smaller part, and for what I think I'll probably do next time, I'll just kind of go over and look at it a bit, because sometimes it's like I would like to cover more and do a lot more, but some of these parts are just so small that I don't get to talk much. I would like to make some shorter videos too, but it's hard to know how long some of these are going to take. In all honesty, it's really hard to know how long some of these are going to take. Like, it's a half an hour, it's an hour. I can't say one way or another. Sometimes it's hard for me to sort of vocalize what's being said here, because it's something that I don't know if I'm very skilled at. I know how to put things together and how they work together, and I can see, like, when one paragraph is the same as this other paragraph because of how it's being read, who's there, what's the focus of the topic, and that sort of thing. I know how to do that, but sometimes I have a difficult time trying to vocalize what I know. But I do the best I can, so I hope this does help you. I do. I really do. As far as what we could do, we could probably do either prayer or the fasting. Maybe I'll do prayer next time, teaching about prayer. Maybe I'll do prayer and fasting, so I've got some more to work with, because I don't think there's that much in here about that. So, yeah, maybe I'll do that next time. That'll be... Well, it's going to start in Matthew chapter 6. Chapter 6:5. So we'll do it that. We'll do that. Get through that. I'll try to have some other videos up this week too. I've just been really busy. I wanted to do more, and I haven't had much time because I'm doing classes again, and so I'm going through that. But I hope this helped you. If there's anything that you want to ask or add or say, whatever you want to do, please leave it in the comments down below. I know that this is probably something that's not going to be everybody's forte all the time because of the simple fact that what Jesus is actually saying when you read it isn't always the same thing that you hear when you go to church. And so there's times where when I go to church, or when I would go to church, there would be things that I would see that I would just think, well, this doesn't seem to be anything like what Jesus was saying, like the way you're acting, portraying yourself. Like I don't know. It's sometimes you'll go to church and it's nice for an experience of a community and stuff, but like I even have parents that will tell me about everything else other than what Jesus had to say. They'll talk about the Old Testament, they'll talk about Revelations, they'll talk about what this mystic said, what that religious person said, what that religious person said, what this other speaker said. It's like, where is Jesus in any of this stuff? I mean, what are you even doing? Why are you so hardcore telling me you're a very religious person, but you have no spirituality? And I've had people tell me, "Oh, you're doing spirituality. You're not talking about this particular religion." Jesus was talking about spirituality the whole time. Everything he had to talk about was spiritual. Everything he was trying to help us with was spiritual. He wasn't trying to help us build anything. He was trying to help us work together as people. Every single thing in that Bible is all about spirituality when it comes to what Jesus had to say in the New Testament. Some things are a little bit mistranslated, pulled out of context, and people don't understand that and get angry with it. I've seen some of these sites out there that are really weird, and it's just people that looked for the worst thing possible and they wrote it down because they wanted it to be bad. These are the people that don't understand much. They haven't read hardly anything about it, and they'll spout out the worst thing that they can find. And it's really frustrating sometimes to talk to people like this, but you still kind of have to because they're not getting it. Maybe they can't read to understand. Maybe they don't have the ability to understand what they read. Maybe they don't care to read anything. Maybe they've heard somebody say something else and they've believed it. But it's like with any story. Read a book. If you can't read a book, this is going to be very difficult for you. If you can read a book and you've read multiple books, you'll understand that the story begins with typically somebody trying to get through some type of problem. There's a story about a person. It could be a biography about a person. Maybe the person's trying to teach you something. But usually it starts off with a subject, and then it goes on and finishes off with the object. The whole story does. The whole story has the beginning part and the end part. Then there's the middle part. The beginning part kind of like details everything that you're starting to understand. Like either if it's about this personal person, if it's about like a time frame of people, a civilization, whatever. And then as you go through the middle, it'll start going through all the different problems that need to be solved and things, the journey that the people are taking through it. And then when you get to the very end, it tells you at the end, what the purpose was. You find out whether the hero survived. You find out whether the people, completed the task they wanted to do. Sometimes it leaves you with a cliffhanger. But most stories will always give you an ending to it, as you go through it. So when I read the Bible, I do the same thing. I'm looking at all the different context of each person because this is really confusing for a lot of people, and I just feel like I should probably say this. But this is something that a lot of people have to know. Multiple different people wrote down the life of Jesus. And some people have a different context of writing than others do. Some people might literally write okay, just as an example, and this is hypothetical. Let's say you have 3 friends, okay? And the 3 friends are going to write about you for this particular day. But they only spent so much time with you. You don't really know, the reader doesn't necessarily know how much time specifically they spent with you, because they're not going to timestamp everything that they write about perfectly. They're not going to timestamp it or anything like that. But one person writes that you got up in the morning, you cooked some eggs, you scrambled them, you ate that, you went out, you did some work, and you came home. Your second friend is going to write, okay, so in the morning he got up, he started to write about this particular thing, and then he went out to eat, and then he did this other particular thing, and then he came home. The third person could write that, he was writing about this, and this is the understanding of what he was trying to say. So each person might write something different about you. Somebody might have a better understanding as to what you're writing, what you're doing with what you're trying to say, whereas somebody else might be actually talking about just the physical details of the day-to-day without understanding anything else. So when you put the different Gospels together, you get 4 different perspectives. 3 of them are the Synoptic Gospels, because some of them have, Luke and Matthew have taken different parts from Mark and incorporated it into their writings. So it is believed that Mark was one of the original sources. That's the reason why a lot of people would contest John, because John wasn't so perfectly matched to them. But when you read John, John has the message understanding of what Jesus was saying. So he wasn't focused on the day-to-day concerns as much as he was focused on the message. So that's why John took a completely different approach than the other writers did. So when I read this together, I'm trying to find all the same cases of the same story, put it together, and if John has the message attached to that particular story, then we can put it all together in a very logical perspective and see exactly what's going on. Because that's what makes sense. That's what makes logical sense. It doesn't make any sense any other way to just read one particular writer and ignore the others. It makes no sense to do that at all. That's basically throwing out extra knowledge that's tied into that particular subject. And so when I go through these and I read them, it makes 100% sense to put it together, define the meaning, and to I guess in a way juice it, for everybody else to kind of see what it was too. Because a lot of people will just jump onto one particular writer and it'll be like, this guy said this, and how do you contest that? Well, did you read what the other ones wrote about it too? I never get an answer back because I know what the answer is. They never did. They're just, so when a lot of people look through this, everybody's trying to look for it for like something they can gain out of it, because that's what the world gives us. What can we grab and obtain from something else in order to make ourselves better? That's what we have in this world, and that's not what Jesus was trying to do. He was trying to help us be a light for others so that they could see that and open their eyes as to what the reality was in a spiritual world that is outside this physical body. So I feel like I had to kind of like go into that a little bit. I hope that explained a few things. I hope you understood a little bit about what the oath was about, what Jesus was saying for the regular people and what he was saying for the Pharisees. Regular people, he's saying, don't go into all this elaborate stuff and make up a lot of mumbo jumbo to say what you mean, to say yes or no. That's all you got to do. If you do any more than that, it's from the evil one. The prophets, or not the prophets, but the Pharisees and the scribes, those people, they can't focus on the external parts of a temple. It's the God above that they need to focus on, and the virtues, the actual things that you do for people, not the temple, for people. That's what's important. And so as far as doing that, if they can do that, then they will be honoring their oath to what they say they are. They say they're men of God. If they're men of God, then they have to do mercy, justice, and fidelity. That's what Jesus was trying to say. So if they want to complete their oath because of who they say they are, they need to do these things. For us regular, well, I wouldn't just say regular people. I mean, everybody is basically, it's something everybody's got to do. But as far as what's normal to do is, you know, you don't need to make an elaborate statement to, you know, get across your point. Just be truthful and say yes and say no. So I think I finished that one. I hope you enjoyed. If you do, leave a like. If you want to leave a comment, please do. You know, it'd be nice to have some conversation about this. I know a lot of people come by here and they'll watch this for a bit, and most millennials of the younger generation would be like, "What is this?" You know, because most people of the younger generation, I'm not going to see this come from that generation. At least I don't see it. I haven't seen it. If you know of other people that are trying to understand the Bible and get a better perspective of it, you know, and you want to talk about them a bit, you know, that's cool too. But it's just, the fact is, like, I don't see anybody doing this. I see major religions talking about these things, and I think that for the most part there's some good in that, and there's some good there too. But there's also the same things happening in the new religions that happened in the old, with how Jesus was describing the oaths here too. They were more concerned about the temple, the outside appearance of it, but inside there was nothing good. And I've seen that in churches. I've seen that in religious leaders, and it looks like it hasn't changed much. So what it really comes down to is what you're actually doing, not what you give to a building. And that's really the point, you know. So I think I'll end on that note. This was a really interesting talk today. So I'll probably try to make something this week too. I might have another video coming up this week. If I don't, then it's going to be probably next week for something. I would like to get out more of these a week, but with school and classes, it's kind of tough, you know, because I just sort of feel like this is kind of important for me to go over and help share. Because like I said, I just don't see other people doing this. You know, I think everything turns, and other people have other understandings of things where they think a lot of these things are all going to turn physical, you know, and I don't think any of that's going to happen. I think it's all, the body is basically a husk. It carries a soul. When the husk dies, it produces a seed or a soul, and if that soul grows, it is something of God. And that is what I see, and that's what I've been able to read and understand so far from just the Bible, not just Jesus' teachings of that. So I guess I've said goodbye plenty of times, and I'll see you later in the next video. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon.